Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar for the North Carolina Bird Atlas. Tonight, we hope to answer your questions about using the bird breeding behavior codes within eBird as part of the North Carolina Bird Atlas. And please remember that all of our behavior codes can be found on our website at ncbirdatlas.org. So make sure you check that out. Again, my name is Christopher Smith. I am the Citizen Science or the Community Science Program Manager and the North Carolina Bird Atlas Project Coordinator for the Wildlife Resources Commission, and it is my great pleasure to speak to you this evening. While I am the one giving the presentation, I am just one part of a large effort to get to where we are today. First, I want to thank the Audubon North Carolina for hosting the webinar. Thank you, Ben, for taking some time with us tonight. Second, introduce three other folks that will be joining us as part of the Wildlife Commission, and that's John Carpenter, our land bird biologist and chair of the steering committee, Scott Anderson, the bird conservation biologist, and Elsa Chen, who is our coastal land bird technician. So thank you guys for joining me also. I quickly want to look at our website. So if you have not gone to our website yet, I highly encourage you to go and explore that. There's a tremendous number of resources available to you, and we are adding more weekly. If you have not had a chance, you can click on the shop button and purchase some creative products that have the Bird Atlas logo on them. So that revenue comes back to the North Carolina Bird Atlas to help support our volunteer efforts. There's also a link on there for our effort map, and we'll talk about a little bit about that in just a little bit. We can show you the checklists and the species that have been observed and some of the behavior codes that are being used. There's also information resources available, steps on how to get started, definitions of breeding codes and when to use them, the volunteer handbook, which is always a good point for your reference, an FAQs page, which has questions and the answers that you've been asking us over the past couple of weeks. Also a tutorials page, which has links to the videos that we have created. That would be the past webinars and a couple other informational videos. So make sure you check all those out. Also want to thank our regional coordinators. As you can see, we have several of them. We do have one vacant spot, and we are trying to create regional coordination teams. So we're looking for at least 2 people to join a team. If you are interested, you can go onto the website and you can contact us through the regional coordination page, or send coordinator@ncbirdatlas.org an email, and that would be me, and I can help you send that link and more information. If you want to reach your coordinator specifically, they all have the same email address, and then just change the number. So as you see, it's the NCBA region, and then you just add their number for the region that you are in at gmail.com, and that goes directly to them. So if we're looking at our website at ncbirdatlas.org, you can scroll to the bottom of that page, and that will give you a quick dashboard of where we are in our Bird Atlas effort. So here we, as of this morning, at right around 11:30, we had 356 atlasers out across the state. They have submitted 6,781 checklists. It also looks at some of the confirmed species within the counties and also the effort in counties, the effort hours that are there. So it is a great way to start tracking a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing across the state and in the field. You can also go and then look at the effort map. So if you click on the effort map, it'll pop up, and that's on that website. It'll show you different categories. As you can see, it says Atlas effort, and you can do completed checklists. So all those green dots are completed checklists across the state. I do want to draw some attention to a quick knockout box. So if you're looking right around the Asheville area, there's quite a bit of green, yellow spots that are in there. But when we start to overlay that with our priority blocks, you'll see that a lot of those are outside of that priority blocks. Now, data is important for us. We do want data across the state. However, for a completed atlas, we need to make sure that we are targeting our priority blocks. We are putting in our effort there, submitting our checklists, and doing our breeding code behaviors. So just keep that, monitoring those, and make sure we're targeting those priority blocks. That'd be great and helpful, helping us to complete our atlas over the next couple of years. One thing that we do want to talk about, as you are submitting all of your data through eBird, there are a couple of observation types, and we've gotten a few questions about which type you should select and whether or not how important that is. It is important because it helps us to determine what you are doing in the field. So those 3 observation types are traveling. So a traveling observation is once you've completed your checklist, you can go through, collect the observation type that would best suit you. A traveling one is a completed checklist with observations made over a distance of 1 mile, and we're asking you to keep that under 1 mile. So that would be one direction, 1 mile in length. So as you're out there traveling, you're doing your birding, you're watching your observations, you're entering all of your data. If you're walking down a path or a trail, just be mindful of how far you're going. That is a traveling observation. A stationary observation is a complete checklist with observations made at a specific point. So if you had driven your car to a site, you parked the car, you walked into the woods or onto the field for a little ways, and you stopped and stood there, and you were observing all of the birds in that area, then that is a stationary observation. We are asking you to keep that observation for less than an hour. So if you're just watching the behaviors of all the birds around you, making notes of them, again, a stationary count, and we are trying to keep that under an hour. So an incidental is typically an incomplete checklist with specific observations and breeding codes. So we'll talk about a scenario later when we get into that, but that may be you're walking somewhere on a path or a trail and something catches your eye and you want to make a note of it. So you quickly pull out your eBIRD, you log in, start a checklist. You're going to log in with any information that you may have. Yes, a bald eagle would be a good a case scenario where you see one and you want to record that where you are. But you do not have time to spend another 10-15 minutes observing all of the other birds in that area. So you only want to record, and you only are recording that bald eagle sighting or whatever it may be. That would be considered an incidental one. So remember, atlasing is the focusing on the behaviors that were there. So it's great that you see them, but watch them and monitor them and see what they're doing. Record those behaviors because that's what's going to help us. So as we go, while you're atlasing, you should be recording all of those birds that you see in here, which will help us determining the abundance and the diversity of the species. However, we are also interested in knowing if these species are reproducing in North Carolina, which is where our bird breeding behavior codes come into play. They are broken down into 4 different categories that provide a different level of evidence to breeding. Observation codes are codes that provide no evidence of breeding. For example, I saw one bluebird and added it to my checklist, or I saw a turkey vulture soaring overhead and they recorded that as an F or a flyover. These are codes that you use that you're just there, you made an observation, you saw them, they weren't doing anything in breeding specific. So you just recorded as an observation. Then you have possible codes. Possible codes are behaviors that indicate potential breeding behaviors. Probable codes are codes indicating a higher level of probability of that breeding. And then we also have confirmed codes, which indicate the birds are actually breeding in the area, which will help in habitat and conservation efforts in the future. All breeding codes can be found again, along with the definitions on our website, ncbirdatlas.org. So if we look at the possible breeding codes, there are 2 codes that we would use in a possible breeding code observation. One is H, inappropriate habitat. So you've seen this bird, it is in the habitat that it normally would be, potentially could be breeding in, but you haven't seen any specific behavior, so you would use H. Singing bird, you just happen to be in the woods or in the field, and this is where their normal habitat would be, but you don't see them, but you do hear them. So you can record it as S, as a singing bird. These are possible breeding codes, meaning that there is a low, you haven't discovered or confirmed that they are breeding, but there is a possibility that is happening. Then you have probable breeding codes, so a little bit more significant. So there's multiple options for you to choose from. You have an S7. So this is a singing individual that has been there for 7 or more days. You went out, you heard your bird singing, you made a note of it in your eBird checklist. You went out a couple days later, a week later, a little bit more than that, and you heard the same type of bird singing again. You can use that as an S7, a singing individual that's been there for 7 or more days. That's a probable code. Multiple birds singing, P. Pair in suitable habitat. Again, you have 2 birds, maybe a mated pair that you making observations of. You can record that as P. Recording it as 2 birds Under P, suitable habitat for that pair. Then you have territorial defense, courtship, displaying, and copulation, and visiting probable nest sites, and agitated behavior for A, and B is a woodpecker wren nest building behavior, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So those are your probable codes. And again, that is a higher probability that those birds are breeding in that area.
So, oh, there you go. You just went to the probable codes.
I switched one slide and didn't change the other, so I'll give you a second on that one. So there you have your probable codes. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about the territorial defense and the agitated behavior later on in our quiz as we go through. So here we have our confirmed breeding codes. So ones that you most likely will see, CN, carrying nesting materials, nest building, distraction displays for the birds that do that, unused nests, occupied nests, recently fledged individuals or young, carrying food, feeding young, carrying fecal sacs, nest with eggs and nest with young. So our confirmed codes, again, are those that we are looking for. So a completed priority block would have all of your birds observed over the period of the 2 seasons. So we're looking at summer and the winter, recording all of those birds with 50% of the birding code, 50% of the species that we've seen confirmed that they are breeding in the area to help us complete that priority block. So with that, we've gone over our breeding codes. Let's look at a quick quiz and go over this, and we can actually do this together. So Ben is going to start our quiz for us. And as he pulls up the poll, I have your first question available to you. So while walking along a trail in western North Carolina, you see a black-throated green warbler. After watching for 10 minutes, you notice she is carrying small twigs. How would you report your observation? Go ahead and click on your observation code. Looks like everyone's coming in. Got a few more people that still want to read through it, make their observation.
We got 45 people, only 30 have. It's anonymous, so give it your best shot.
I can tell you if you're right or wrong, but we will go over some examples.
I'm sorry. Are you supposed to click on the screen on your choice? Is that all you have to do?
That's a Ben question.
John, because you're a co-host, I don't know if you can do the poll.
Gotcha.
All right. So it looks like we have 34 people, and we've ended that one. So if we click on our next slide. So our codes, we had 2 that are a good best situation. So you could potentially use H in the appropriate habitat. That is a possible code. It's a good code. It is correct. It is accurate. However, the best breeding code is going to be CN, which is carrying nesting materials. Again, this code should be used when you see an adult carrying nesting material to an unseen nest. Those materials can be sticks, grass, mud, cobwebs. All right. NB, which is nest building, should be used when you can actually see them building that nest of the actual nest site. That is when you're going to go ahead and use that NB code. Now, some common coding mistakes. This code does not apply to species that regularly carry materials which may be associated with tool use, food caching, or building roosting cavities, but not with nesting. Examples: crows, vultures, wrens, woodpeckers, wood ducks, nightjars, mergansers, brown-headed cowbirds. All right, those are examples of when you would not use CN, carrying nesting material, for those specific species. All right, we'll get to another example of that in a second too, and we'll follow up with some other questions. All right, if you guys are ready for the next one. Question number 2. You are crossing a field when you come across a killdeer squawking at you and flopping in a circle with its wings drooping on the ground. How would you report your observation? So we're going to go ahead and open that question. Crossing a field when you come across a killdeer squawking at you and flopping in a circle on the ground. I think we are at 35, which is correct for us. All right, Ben, we're good. So our majority said distraction display. So again, our best breeding code is going to be a distraction display. Other codes, a good code again, H, inappropriate habitat, just at a good level. Again, that's a possible level. We're trying to get those to a confirmed level. The confirmed level would be DD, distraction display. So this code, use this code when a display injury is observed in an attempt to draw an intruder away from the nest or the young. So a killdeer flopping around in a circle is a distraction display. So now, if you said you fell for the trap, which was the T, a territorial display applies when aggressive behavior interaction between an individual of the same species. So T is an interaction, aggression display between those same species. And A, an agitated behavior applies when with a bird or calls in response of different species, being a predator, a human, brood parasites, that kind of thing. So T, same species, A for agitated behavior, other species from that. So that's the difference, the distraction display between territorial and agitated. Anyone have any specific questions with that one? No? All right, sounds good. We'll move on to question number 3. So question number 3, while atlasing in the woods of your priority block, you see a wood thrush carrying a grub and continue to watch him. He returns to the nest and you see his mated pair. How would you report your observation? So lots of different options there. Is it A, an appropriate habitat? P, a pair in a suitable habitat? Occupied nest for ON? CF for carrying food? FY for feeding young? And E for nest with eggs?
Yeah, it looks like people are thinking on this one. This isn't an easy one right out of the gate.
This is not. This is one of the ones that you've got. So we're at 30. I think 35 is our magic number. Got 3 people still thinking about it. 2 people. We're almost there. Come on, you can do it. 35. All right, here we go. So what is the, carrying food. 58% of you believe it would be carrying food. So if we're looking at this, H again is a good code. It's a possible level. A probable level, which is the P, there are a pair in suitable habitat. That's a better code than H. However, you have the best code, which is carrying food, which is a confirmed level. But if we want to look at it, the best of the best code would be occupied nest. So an occupied nest, you want to use this code when you see an adult sitting in a nest or incubating position, adult entering a nest site and remaining or exchange of incubation duties by the pair. This code is slightly better than the carrying food code. And the reason why we do that is because if you select occupied nest, you can document its location and you can come back later and look to see if there was actually any hatchlings that were there or young that they may be in that area. So if you selected CF, you were not wrong. ON can be, so 8 of you would have selected ON. I would give you a good thumbs up. CF, carrying food, again, great code, but there is one slightly better, mainly because we're trying to get you to record that site, and that'll be useful later when you go back to look at those observations in the field. So questions?
Don't see any in the chat.
So I'm sorry. So Erickson, there it wasn't clear from the wording of the question that you actually saw the nest. Yeah, sorry, that was sort of in the picture, so it was kind of in there. But you are correct. Sometimes you can't. But so is what you observe and the way that you were out there in the field. So, so there's that. Codes are ranked from highest to lowest, and we're encouraged to report the highest codes, to my understanding. Yes. So highest to lowest, mainly being possible, probable, confirmed is how they are. Once you get into that confirmed level, there's some slight nuances between them. But you are correct. I mean, it's not wrong to consider it carrying food. But if they're on the nest, you could always put it on the occupied nest, and you can go from there.
Oh yeah, there's a question in there. Can you only pick one code? Yes, you can only pick one code. And again, as long as that falls in the highest category of codes possible, you're pretty safe with whatever you've chosen. So yeah, you can only pick one code. So pick the highest one.
Awesome, great job. All right, so question number 4. You continue to watch the wood thrush and you notice the adult lowering food into the nest. A small head pops up. How would you report your observation? Side questions of, do you start a new checklist to code to change a behavior, or do you even change your code, or do you leave it? So if you're going to leave it, you can select what you had already done before, or the code that you've already selected. If you're going to change it, then you can go ahead and change your breeding code. So go ahead. How would you report, or would you not change your breeding code? We're at 6. And then Ben also has the other question on there. So how many wood thrush would you report? So you got 2 questions on this one. Are you going to change your code, or are you going to leave it the same? And then how many wood thrush would you put in your checklist? This is designed to be tricky. So we're at 20. I gave you the code options of ON, occupied nest, CF for carrying food, which were from the previous slide, FY for feeding young, or NY for nest with young. All right, we're at 24. Again, no, I can't tell you who did what, so feel free to select what you think is correct. Designed to be difficult. All right, I think some of you gave up. All right, so let's look at this. So right now, we have 15%. I'm sorry, 15 people, 56% of said feeding young, 33% of you said nest with young. Someone wanted to start a new checklist. Some of you didn't want to change the code, continuing with food. And then let's see, down here we have how many would you report? The majority of you said 3, 63% of you said 3, some said 2 or more. So if we go and look at what we would recommend you do. So again, all of those are at the confirmed level. You have a confirmed level of occupied nest, carrying food, and nest with young. So the answer to the very first question, would you start a new checklist? No, you don't need to end your checklist and start a new one. You can actually modify your observation as you were there to choose a different a breeding code. The best breeding code that you could select from that and the change in scenario would be NY, nest with young. So you're going to use this code when you see or hear a nest with young in it. Also use this code for nestlings that are being fed by the adults. All right. So a common coding mistake, feeding young, the FY code is used when an adult bird is feeding young that have left the nest. So they have to be outside of the nest and they are bringing food to the young to use FY. As the young is in the nest, it is just nest with young. All right. And of course, the how many birds would you now code? You have the 2 adults, and then you made an observation where you had the 1 nestling. So you would actually select 3. So you have 3 wood thrush, and you're going to use the code NY, nest with young. Sorry, I saw there were some questions coming up. Scott, was there anything we needed to answer? I missed a few of them.
There's one in there. It says, what if we saw another wood thrush 5 minutes down the trail? Will we start a new list? And I would say the answer is no for that, that you would just bump up the number of wood thrush that you had seen. So you would say if it were 3 from this checklist, then you would bump it up to 4, but leave the behavior code that you recorded for this interaction. So. That's a good question. Robert asks if how can we be certain of the bird species in the nest? Yeah, supposing you mean it could be a cowbird, it's possible, or some other nest parasite. I would say, you know, to do the best you can. If if you see young in the nest, then I would probably count it as a wood thrush, unless it's pretty obvious that it's one of them is not like the other. So. So yeah, good question.
That is a good question, and that is Scott's answer is pretty much status quo of how you would have that going out there. For the other bird atlasers are doing the same thing in different states. So you may have seen the young. If you can't identify that it is not a wood thrush, you can just claim it as a nestling for that wood thrush, and then mark it down as 3. Again, you are in your priority block, and this hopefully is not the only pair of wood thrush that are reproducing at this time. So if you're walking and you had 2 or 3 before, and you made an observation and you added these 2 to it, so now you're up to 4 wood thrush, and you see the nestling just added to make it 5. So again, we're looking at it as a larger block section for that. All right, good questions. Let's go on to the next one. So question number 5. You get out of your car just outside of New Bern to survey a part of the Neuse River, and you see a bald eagle soar overhead and disappear out of sight. You know that the Croatan National Forest is south of your location, but how would you report your observation? So you can do no code. I just saw the bald eagle. H, inappropriate habitat. F as a flyover, or T as a territorial defense. All right. We're up to about 25 people so far. Looks like we're at 34. We're going to go ahead and we can end that one. So looks like 83% of you would use the code flyover. So let's take a look at this one. So our best breeding code is an F as a flyover. You want to use this code when you see bird flying high overhead or in a direct flight. This is the behavior code that does not indicate breeding, just the observation. F, the flyover code, should only be used when the bird is flying overhead and not using that habitat. So, for example, if you see birds that are flying from perch to perch, that is not a flyover. You're just making that observation, and you're watching those birds to see what other activities that they do. Now, if you happen to be at the edge of the Croatan forest and the bald eagle was landing in the nest or in the tree or using that habitat other than just flying, then you would not use the flyover code. You would probably want to use H, the inappropriate habitat. Questions on that one? Awesome, thumbs up. So the majority of turkey vulture observations would be flyover, correct? Yes, I mean, they're going to be high soaring, so they're searching. You would just use your flyover unless you see some other action that they may be doing. Good question.
Yeah, Stephen had one on a previous question too, but it applies here. He said the idea is to confirm as many species as possible for the block. Once you reach a confirmed code, isn't it more desirable to focus on confirming additional species? Certainly, yeah. I mean, we're using this data for all sorts of things, breeding codes being one of them. So doing the best you can to get the highest codes for the greatest number of species is a great goal. And making sure you're recording the diversity of the species that are there. So yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yes, given limited time, right?
Yep.
Turkey vultures flying near a cliff. H.
Yeah, I'll add that. I think turkey vultures are, you know, it's a little tricky. They don't tend to just fly in a direct line across your site and just and are gone very quickly. So in my experience, I think that could, you know, that bird is kind of using that sort of habitat directly below where it's, you know, hunting or scavenging or looking for something within that habitat.
Yep.
The other question was, what if you see two flying in tandem? I don't know if I would venture to call that a pair.
Yes,
but,
I don't think I'd call it a pair. I would probably go code 2 as F, as a flyover.
Or like John was saying, like
Correct.
in,
Where if it
in
was
habitat.
exactly. All right, let's go on. We got question number 6. So you are atlasing the woods in your priority block, and you begin to watch a Carolina wren gather twigs, leaves, and other small materials. You watch the wren manipulate the items into a small cavity in the tree. How would you report your observation? So here you have a Carolina wren gathering twigs, leaves, and other materials, stuffing them into a tree. You not code it, just code the number of wren that you see. H, inappropriate habitat. B, woodpecker wren nest building. CN, which is carrying nesting material. Or NB, nest building. So we got 28 people selecting. They're up to 30. Got a little bit of everything on this one. Awesome. 35. We hit our magic number. Awesome. Good job. So let's look at how we would code this one. So again, the best breeding code is going to be B, woodpecker wren nest building. We touched a little bit about this earlier in our previous question. So you want to use B, the woodpecker wren nest building code when you see a wren nest building, as wrens may build dummy nests before the female selects a nest. Use this code for excavation of cavities by woodpeckers as they drill holes for roosting. All right, so this one is very specific to woodpeckers and those wren. So this 22 of you, the 61% selected B, that is correct. All right, so now coding, so part of our coding discussion. So NB, nest building, refers only to species that build nests, including those in houses. So cavity nests do not count for NB. That comes out of our handbook and some of our points that we have in there. Do not use nest building for woodpeckers, including flickers and sapsuckers, wrens, chickadees, titmice, vultures, and the brown-headed cowbird. All right, so you do not want to use that NB or carrying nesting material. You want to use B, woodpecker and wren nest building. Awesome. Nice job, everyone. All right, so let's go on. Question number 7. You were talking to your friend about the North Carolina Bird Atlas, and one mentioned that she heard a cerulean warbler while she was on a hike last week. The next day you go to the same spot she mentioned and you hear and see a cerulean warbler. How do you report your observation? Your options: no code, coded as a cerulean warbler, in the number that you saw. H, inappropriate habitat. S, the singing bird. S7, the singing individual's been there for 7 or more days. M, multiple singing males. Your friend told you about it last week while you're playing cards, and you decided to go out and find that cerulean warbler. You got 26 of you.
Might depend on who won the card game.
Yes, exactly. That would not be me. 32. Got 3 of you still out there. One more.
Yeah, Alan, certainly there is a code list when you are entering these, and it has at least a word description. Well, it has the descriptions they're there under code options. But we're also working on a field list that you could have in hand if you wanted that as a quick thing. But you can also print out those behavior codes from the website as well.
Yes. And we'll go over some of that towards the end too. Okay. So 74% of you said singing bird, and that is going to be our best option. So you could possibly use H, inappropriate habitat. That is a good code. The best code to use is going to be the S as a singing bird. That is going to be a possible code level code. You want to use this code when you see an adult singing in suitable habitat. Now, the S7, the singing bird for roughly 7 days, is used when a male or female is present at the same location for at least 2 occasions, 7 or more days apart. However, you don't know what your friend actually heard or saw. So therefore, it is your observation, your checklist. So we're going to have you code it as an S, and then hopefully go back in and look for that cerulean warbler later. So some common coding mistakes. These codes only apply to species that have songs associated with breeding. Do not use the singing code with ducks, geese, shorebirds, terns, gulls, wading birds, pigeons, jays, crows, and ravens. All right. So only use the singing birds for the birds that have songs that are associated with breeding. So additional actions at the bottom of that is, what else would you want to do? This is sort of our conversation or discussion. So a cerulean warbler is one of our species of greatest concern. So we are interested in knowing more details about that. So we would encourage you to go ahead, if you actually got out and you were walking on your trail and you had a checklist going and you found your cerulean warbler, we would ask that you so you have 2 options. One, we prefer that you end your checklist, start a new one, record it as a cerulean warbler, get the exact location, snap a picture, record the bird if you can, any of those options. So that way we're actually getting it. So you now can either do a stationary, looking at all the birds around you in observation using the stationary method, going for about 15-20 minutes, recording all of those. And then you can end that checklist, start a new one, and then you can continue on your traveling checklist. By having that specific checklist, it actually gives us a data point, so we could go back in and look and confirm that and try to find more information about that habitat specifically to that bird. So that would be the one that we have. Now, is it wrong if you did a traveling checklist, you continued on, you marked out your cerulean warbler, you got a picture of it, and you moved on? No, it is not. Again, that would be part of that same path. You're in your priority block. Information is good. We love it. However, if we can actually find the actual data point of where you actually saw that cerulean warbler, that helps us out in the future. So multiple options for you to do, but make sure you have, when you're doing that, you end your checklist, start one, and then start a new one. So you sort of do an incidental, if you will, if you don't have time to actually stay and do a full observation at that same location. I know that was a lot of information. Any questions on that one?
Looks like Stephen had a question. What about a blackpoll that sings during migration, no breeding confirmed within hundreds of miles? I would say record that as a singing bird. We'll be able, we'll get the data of what the behavior is and what the species is, and we'll be able to make that calculation on the back end. Plus, we'll be able to filter out by time of year which ones are which. So, yeah, when in doubt, just record the behavior that you're observing. Definitely, it does get a little bit tricky with some of those breeding songs that happen during migration.
So there is a list. There's an appendix list in our handbook that you have. We are working on some field guides or some field notes for you, which would have those rare species for you. We are trying to get that out, but you can use the handbook. We'll actually I might be able to pull that page out of the handbook and actually add it to the website, so you don't have to go searching for it, but it makes that list for you, and we'll make notes of that. And Scott just threw up that link right now. So that is a good question. Unfortunately, there's lots of birds that are part of our special need that need that attention. So it's a hard component, but there's ones that you might pop up in your head, the ones that you're trying to find. All right, so let's jump on to our next question. So question number 8, while atlasing a local park in your priority blocks, you observe 2 Canada geese with young. How do you report your observation? So this is our last question. So your option codes are no code. Just add the geese to the checklist. H, inappropriate habitat. P, pair in suitable habitat. Or FL, recently fledged young. And our follow-up question is, how many Canada geese would you report? So we've got 28 of you already selected your options, up to 32. 33, and we're there. Good job. And you can throw your number up in the chat if you'd like. We can go from there. So again, it's a good, better, best scenario from here. Yes, they are in appropriate habitat. Yes, there is a pair in suitable habitat, and there are recently fledged young. If we are looking at the highest confirmed level, we are going to go with FL, recently fledged young. Use this code when you see recently fledged or downy young, still dependent upon adults, and presumed capable of extended flights from the nest site. So the common coding mistake, the mistake is to use this code. This code does not apply to family groups late in the breeding season, which will still be interacting but are far from the breeding location. So most of you put down you would choose 5, and you would actually count the recently fledged young and the 2 adults. So you would code 5 Canada geese at your park. And we had 83% of you chose recently fledged young. Nice job. So again, a couple things bringing you back to our website. If you haven't had a chance to get on there, go to ncbirdatlas.org. The breeding codes, the definitions, and some of these examples are on that web page, so you can go ahead and read through those. There's some additional quizzes. We've set up, or we pulled them from New York, so some of the species may not be what you're used to, but those examples are there. Coding examples are the same, so you can look at those breeding quizzes. You can click on the volunteer handbook. Those have our common coding mistakes, some of the ones that we've identified today. It also has the chart that has our rare species list, and like I said, I'll try to pull that out for you. If you still have further questions as you're out sampling and doing your atlasing work, you can always contact me, your project coordinator, you can do that email coordinator@ncbirdatlas.org, or again, contact your regional coordinator and they can go out and help you. So with that, I'm done with my portion of this. Now, let me know what questions you guys have so we can go over and do all that. Thank you guys for taking it. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I wanted to say a couple things. First, thanks to everyone for participating, and just kind of for taking guesses and answering poll questions. I wanted to point out that I hope you don't get discouraged with some of the complexity here, like different species you got to think of differently than others. But I hope it's it's an opportunity to sort of embrace learning more about bird behavior and the variety of life history strategies that birds in North Carolina use to survive. So I think it's an awesome learning opportunity. I know I've learned stuff, and this is something that happens with scientific work all the time, where you have to figure out exactly how to categorize things. So awesome. So yeah, let's do some questions. Let's see. Somebody said, my neighborhood is split between one priority block and one block that is not priority. I might observe a pair feeding the same young on both sides of the line. Suggestions?
You want me to take that one?
Sure.
So I'm in the same situation. So if I go breeding in my backyard, I'm actually inside the priority block. If I go out my front door and off to the right just a tad, I am not. We are working with eBIRD beginning, or hopefully by May 20th, with a new rollout of the next update for the eBIRD app. Your priority block should be shown on your map. I would code them because it is so close to being on that boundary line. I would code it as your priority block. So you're saying in your boundaries, you're making those observations. I would just code it as whatever, I'm sorry, the situation that you had within your priority block.
Yeah, let's see. We had another one. We had one from earlier. Somebody wanted a little bit of clarification on nuthatch singing versus calling, woodpecker calls. We kind of touched on that, like non-breeding vocalizations would not count as singing. So if you're in doubt for those kinds of things, like you hear, the sort of ping pong bouncy ball of a downy, then I wouldn't count that as singing because you can hear that. You can hear that a lot. So yeah, anything that's calling, I wouldn't call it a singing code. I don't know if any of Chris or John, if you have other input on that.
So going back to our handbook, so singing codes. Let's see, this code is also used for non-singing birds, giving their primary vocalizations, such as a woodpecker drumming, owl calls, rail vocalizations, and woodpecker penting. In some species, both males and females sing. So you can use the S code for examples. Let's see, second year male, American redstart, singing in an abnormal song in a hedgerow in early June. Woodpeckers drumming, you could use the S code for, is woodpeckers drumming is analogous to singing, is the way that we have it in our handbook. So you can use that. There is some more examples in what we just went through that really punch out how you can use those breeding codes to their advantage.
All right, lots of good questions in here. Awesome. Here's one random one that I know the answer to, so I'll say it. How to report when a female and chicks die in the nest box. Male is gone, so none are seen during that checklist day. I would count that as nest. If you have chicks in there, I would say nest with young. Even though they're dead, they did breed there, so we do know that species breeds in there at that time. It'd be similar to you found a used nest. All of those codes are within the confirmed category, and so they'd all count as, yep, that bird has nested in that block. So yeah, let's see, let me keep track here. There was another one that was emailed. Oh, one was, is atlasing more of a quality over quantity or more sort of a question of like quality over quantity or quantity over quality kind of question for atlasing. I don't know if somebody wants to take, that's kind of a nebulous answer. So anybody want to take that?
I'm happy to do that. So it's sort of a combination of the both. It's that balancing act. So we do need to know, we are looking at abundance and we are looking at and breeding behavior. So we are encouraging you to do both. So you want to be out in your priority block recording the number that you see, but it's going to be the breeding codes that are going to be key to helping us identify which habitats and where these birds are potentially breeding across North Carolina, which is a major function or a major piece of our atlas. So we don't want you to just not continuously code quantity, because we still need to know what is the abundance across the state. So it's that balancing act between the two. But we do want you to spend some time actually observing what these birds are doing in that habitat to help us figure out this bird atlas and all the pieces that go with it. So I don't think that answered your question, but it's sort of the government side of us that tells us that we're looking for both.
Yeah, I'll say that it may just depend on what your what your personal goal or objective is for that day. If you're just trying to cover a lot of ground and see a lot of things, then maybe just it's the quantity for that particular outing, and you're you're visiting lots of areas in your block and you're getting familiar with it, and you're building up a species list and finding out where to go back to next when you want to kind of settle in and start making some more detailed observations about behaviors as they sort of progress throughout the season. So similar to what Chris is saying, I mean, it is kind of both, but I think you can kind of maybe break it up just based on your goals for that particular day.
All right, here's another question. Let's see. So far, I've mainly got breeding confirmations on the low-hanging fruit, such as barn swallow nests under bridges, bluebirds, purple martins, house sparrows in nest boxes, Canada geese. How do we go about documenting the harder species, such as those yellow-throated warblers? I would say if you're interested in it, then it's just a matter of spending more time with the birds and sort of adjusting your birding excursion to just sort of sit and watch a bird for a while, follow it, see if it does behaviors that indicate a higher code. So I would I guess that would be my answer for those species. But as John was saying, it's whatever your goals are for your birding excursion. But if you're up for trying a different kind of birding, then we highly recommend it. So
yeah, finding any nest is challenging. So you got to be in the mindset that you're gonna have to dedicate some time to see that. But when you find it, I think most of us, we're on this call for a reason. Like, we would get excited about that. So there is motivation behind it, but sometimes if you still see a lower confirmed code, it still is confirmed, and we've got a lot of blocks to cover and a lot to do. So if you're able to sort of spread yourself out and survey some more areas, then it's still okay to sort of just see it carrying food or just carrying nesting material and move on. But some species are out in a little bit more difficult habitats to get to, or they nest higher up in the canopy, and so it does take some commitment and time. But it's definitely worth it, I think, when you do see those things.
Another question was, it looks like Chris has addressed this one in the chat there. Explain a bit more about all the birds that to not include in the nest building. And Chris put some text in there from our chat. The intention behind that, excluding those birds, is the fact that those birds might be building nests but aren't actually breeding. So woodpeckers make holes even if they're not going to raise chicks that year. So we want to get as close to the breeding behavior as possible. And so that's why most of those birds included in that don't count as breeding behaviors. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. That's a good question that just came up. Nuthatch and gnatcatcher singing versus calling. Who wants to answer that one?
What was the question?
It's a very short question. Singing versus calling for nuthatches and gnatcatchers. Gnatcatcher is a really good example. The vocalization that you almost always hear 99% of the time is technically their call. And so you would have to just leave it as an observation if that's all you've got to go on, which is okay. I think, we've said before, maybe tonight and others, go with your best guess, from what your experience can teach you. And you can always go back in and change a code later, as you're, hopefully learning things and growing throughout this process. So, and also use the comments fields with species, and you can comment at the entire checklist level or for individual species. And sometimes just adding some of those little minor comments or details can help remind you later on, or help remind the EBIRD reviewer later on,
trying to decipher what you actually saw.
Yeah. Okay. Another one. It's a great one. I'm new to this survey. Has everyone started already? Some people have. Yes. Remember, it's a 5-year study, so there's plenty of time to participate. So, and we're encouraging folks and it's a year-round study, so it's not just breeding. Tonight we're focusing on breeding codes because we're, entering breeding season and in breeding season for some species. Yeah, anytime you see breeding behavior, then you can record it. You're good to start for the next 5 years. You can be collecting data any day for the next 5 years. The next one, and then we've got a couple more popping up in the chat there. To be clear, anytime we observe a species from the rarity list, would like us to put it in a separate checklist for that one observation, no matter the code? Would it be incidental?
Sorry, I was distracted.
That's all right.
I'm trying to make sure I got everything up here for you. We are getting to 8 o'clock. So, if we don't get to some of your questions that we have on here, we will try to add them to the FAQs and follow up with some links back to that one. I'm sorry, Scott, one more time. What was your question?
Oh, no worries. Yeah, it was to be clear, anytime we observe a species from a rarity list, would you like us to put it in a separate checklist for that one observation, no matter the code? Would it be incidental?
So we have this conversation between the three of us all the time. It is what you have time for. Again, we are trying to find the most specific and the most detailed information possible. So if you have a long traveling checklist and you come across a rare species, if you just throw it in your checklist, we at least have that information, so it is good. That's a good scenario. We've got the species identified and counted, and you can continue on. The better scenario would be for you to go ahead and end a checklist, start that rare bird checklist immediately at that spot. Just do a quick incidental, end your checklist, get the details in there, a picture if you can for confirmation, or a recording if you had to, whatever you could to confirm that was that species itself. And that checklist, make it incidental and move on. The best type scenario, end your checklist from before, record the rare species, the birds that's there, do a stationary for the next 15, 20 minutes where you're recording everything in that area. So everything that bird is interacting with, getting observations of pictures, breeding codes, whatever you can, and that checklist as complete because you've done everything that you possibly could in that area, and then continue on with your traveling. So again, when you're atlasing, it's designed to be enjoyable. We want you to have a good time. We want you to enjoy your birding, but we want you to record the behaviors that you have. So again, it's a good, better, best type scenario. So whatever you have time to do is what we're asking you to accomplish for us. And don't know if you want to change that. And
we got 2 more questions that are sort of related that I think we can hit before we take off. I want to honor everybody's time here, but one was what are long-term plans for priority blocks where no birders live or bird regularly? This happened in Oregon. Birders were incentivized with money to travel to remote places to cover costs. Any discussion regarding this? And somebody also asked, how many times a week do we need to go out? It's entirely up to you. Whatever you're up for doing, we will gladly accept your observations in there. In addition to volunteers, we're hiring technicians every year to also cover some of those remote blocks, those ones that don't get covered as much. So at the end of the year, as we go along, we have these regional coordinators who will also be identifying those blocks that are rare and probably encouraging people to go out to those. And I think we'll think about ways to incentivize those. Right now, we don't have the money to pay people to do it, unfortunately. That would be great, but yeah, so hopefully I think that answers the question, unless you guys have something else to say about that.
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
Yep. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott for closing. I just want to thank you guys for joining us. And with that, Scott, it's all you.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have a whole much else to say. Just a big thank you to all you for coming and participating and taking your time tonight to learn more about the breeding codes. Again, enjoy learning more about these birds and their diverse life histories. I know I've learned a lot of stuff working on this project myself, so it's been great. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, you can shoot Chris at coordinator@ncbirdatlas.org. Check out our website, any of that. So great to see everyone here. Take care. Have a good night.